Are you creative? Do you have ideas just oozing out of you? You ever taken any of those really cool ideas to anybody in your church leadership and they say, we've never done it like that before. That's not how we do things around here. And you're like, but it's going to work. It's going to be brilliant. And they're like, well, I've never done anything like that. I don't think we're going to do that. Well, guys, today we're going to talk about how to overcome that.
Is that it? Was that close? That was pretty close.
Hey, all you crazy kids out there. Welcome to another episode of the Church Media Guys Show. In case we haven't met, my name is Dave Curley, and I'm the founder of ChurchTrainingAcademy.com, which is a website and a community of folks just like you and me who are learning how to use and exploit media and technology so we can take the gospel to the world and reach the people, the nations, the families, change lives, do all that wonderful stuff. With me, as always, is my lovely and talented co-host, Mr. Justin Nava. Hello, sir.
What's going on, Dave? And what's going on, everyone? Today is a very special episode because this is something that we keep hearing almost to a frustrating degree, because we say, hey, what do you guys want to learn? Do you want to learn this? Do you want to learn streaming? Do you want to learn audio? Do you want to? And people keep coming back saying, we need to learn how to get our church unstuck from the past. So we found what I think is the ultimate resource to help you get started moving forward in that direction. So this episode, I think, is going to be a special place and one that's going to be replayed several times for everyone. Am I hyping it up too much? That's honestly how I feel.
No, I think you're right. I think it's one of the things that kind of plagues us. There've been a long time. We've been talking with our buddy, the local guy here. I won't mention his name, but it's a friend of yours and mine who's in church ministry and who is going through a bunch of projects and stuff. And he keeps running into some of these types of things where he comes up with a communications idea or a creative idea or something, and then he says, coming up with the idea, proving the concept to a handful of people. Great, but then you start getting to the decision makers and stuff, and he says, like trying to push a rope, because we haven't done that before. That's not how we do things. We've been doing it like this for a long time, and it works and stuff. And he's sitting there going, no, it's not. It's one of these things that I remember doing this when I was a kid, when we were in when I was getting into youth group and we started doing praise and worship music. And back then we didn't have like the digital projectors and stuff. We had like a transparency unit, where you write on it, and it's got the little hook, that comes up with the periscope and shines on the wall. Old style, right? So we did that, and then we actually had slides made. So we had a slide deck, literally, where it's click it, with the new slides. We were doing that stuff, and I remembered there was so much pushback from like my grandmother and her friends and all this. My grandmother was always kind of silently cool about it, but all her friends were all, that's not how you're supposed to do it. That's not how Jesus did it. And, I'm like going, oh, yeah. No, Jesus saying pass it on and old rugged cross. I remember he led him in old rugged cross right there on the Sermon on the Mount, while he was preaching out of the King James. So, it's a struggle that we all have to deal with and stuff. And I'll tell you, when talking with Mike, he is really... He really, it's interesting, and I think we mentioned this in the clip we're going to show. One of the things that Mike has done is unknowingly, is he kind of dovetailed into what Jeanette was saying in our episode with her, talking about bringing the older generation along and speaking to them and helping get buy-in and all this kind of stuff. It's like these two episodes together are like a 1-2 punch on moving into the current time, I think, and bringing them happily and excitedly into some of the new technology and new methods and new trends and things like that. I think these two episodes together are a great like a great movie. Here's the prequel and the sequel together.
Absolutely. You and I are just filling in the gaps with Rogue One and Han Solo and whatever is coming up next.
And now for our feature presentation.
Michael Lukaszewski is the founder of Church Fuel, an organization that is committed to providing insanely practical resources to help move the church forward. He is a husband, he is a pastor at heart, and he lives with his wife and kids in Atlanta. Michael, thank you so much, my brother, for taking the time to hang out with the Church Media Guys.
Well, I am excited about hanging out with the Church Media Guys today. This will be fun.
before we get into the meat of what we're going to be talking about today, I was wondering if I could do a handful of like really rapid fire questions at you, so that the folks could really get to know the deep, dark recesses of your soul.
Absolutely. I don't know if we have all that kind of time, but let's go for it.
Okay. So, tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Okay. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Okay. See,
2 for 2. I'm liking it.
Yeah, exactly. This guy's cool. Not only, has he, been like modeling his facial hair and his look after me, he's also a Star Wars guy. So awesome. Okay. Like Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Okay. Like Chick-fil-A or like Tex-Mex?
Well, those are like two whole different categories of things. So I would say Tex-Mex, but I live in Atlanta, so you can't be discounting Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, exactly. Do you guys have Tex-Mex out there?
It's like in random gas stations. So yes.
Yeah, and Taco Bell doesn't count.
Taco
right?
Bell, yes.
That is awesome. So, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Introvert.
Yet you put yourself out there.
Yeah. There's a country song from like 10 years ago that talks about how much more famous and cool people are online. And so I'm way cooler online than I am in person.
Awesome. One of the things that Justin and I run into in doing what we do, we train and equip small and medium-sized churches how to exploit the technology and use it to share the gospel. We've each run into this at various levels in our own church and the ministry areas that we serve there. But we also have a lot of our viewers, and it's really interesting. Some of them are older folks, like our parents' age, and they're saying,
Sure.
How do I help my pastor get past this? Well, that's not the way we've always done it type of mentality or thinking. It's worked this way for the past 25 years. How do you get past that? Because I just want to go in with a wrecking ball and say, yeah, it worked 25 years ago when you had 500, now you have 80. So
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah, that's a tough question. And so, I think there are definitely tools and tactics and strategies that we can do. But, that question of, which is, I know is our topic today, it's like if our church is stuck, right? We feel like it's stuck in the past. And so that's something we as leaders know. Like we go, hey, we're doing things the way that used to work 25 years ago. It doesn't work that way anymore. But how do you bridge that gap between those two things? And it's a tension, right? Because we as leaders will always want to push our church forward. But people, I don't care whether they've been there for 25 years or 25 minutes, people like it the way they like it. And so, we all like things the way that we like things. And it's not sometimes a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of effective and not effective. And sometimes I get attached to things that are not as effective, but I'm still used to it. And I'd rather have what I'm used to, even if it's not as effective. And so I think that's part of human nature. And so one of the things that I would always say to start with is to really try to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I know it's hard, so when somebody that comes and says, our church needs to change, or these people won't change, or why do we have to do it this way? They have their preferences just like we have their preferences, even though they're outdated, even though they may be irrational, even though it may be from technology to 15 years old. The people in general, let's try to give them the benefit of the doubt. And one of the things we talk about in leading this is that people struggling to adapt to this changing culture, they really don't need somebody to come along and lecture them or beat them over the head. They need somebody to pastor and shepherd them through those changes that they may or may not like.
That makes sense. We've talked about that a little bit with Jeanette Yates about, showing empathy to people that like the way it is. They're comfortable. And for many of the older folk, it's church has been one thing. The world has changed for them over 30 years, but the church has kind of been the same.
Yep.
We've adjusted a few things, but since the Jesus movement to the worship wars in those 40 years, not much changed.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot. And you talk about, you actually draw a really good lesson from the transition from Joshua to Moses and recognizing the past and not exclusively focusing on the future. How can we implement that, like me? Because I'm not I'm very thick-skinned. I have hard empathy. I'm trying to learn. But so how can I recognize what we've done, but also still move forward? So it's kind of like facing forward, but maybe your head's to the back. Can you explain that to me and maybe other thick-skinned individuals?
Yeah, and I'm that way too. I think there's a lot of us that are that way. So maybe we need a support group or something. But I love that story.
Anonymous.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I love that story of Moses and Joshua, right? Because Moses led the people. God prepared him for a really long time, and then he led the people through a really important time. But he didn't get to go all the way, right? He didn't get to go the final step into the promised land. And Joshua takes over, who had been there. He had some credibility. The people knew him. But when Joshua took over from leadership, basically the people said, hey, as we followed Moses, we're going to follow you. And so there was this connection from hey, as this happened in the past, we saw you with Moses the whole time. You're not a new Moses. You're not a Moses number 2. You're a different person. But like we followed Moses, we're going to follow you. And I think it's real easy for those of us in leadership to come into a new setting, or maybe we want to change, and we throw out the past instead of building on it. And I think great leaders, they acknowledge the sacrifices that people made in the past. So that, you mentioned the worship wars, Justin, somebody fought a war to get it like that, the way it was, and we're fighting a new war to get it to change to what we wanted it to change to. But somebody somebody fought through a ton of battles to make it the way it was. And just recognizing that. And I think, there's some sacrifices that happened before we showed up, and acknowledging that is sometimes a great thing to do.
I got your article of, what to do when your church is stuck in the past. And the next thing you talk about is finding common ground. So we've kind of figured out where they're coming from. We're recognizing where we've come from, right? And so just, how they see it, and then where we've come from to where we are now. And now you talk about finding common ground. So I'm trying to move forward here. They're trying to stay still. But you're talking about finding common ground. How does that kind of start the shift? And what does that do when you're trying to move forward on a project?
Yeah, I think it's that Venn diagram, the 2 circles where there's that little part in the middle that overlaps. And so let's say you've got the old way of doing things, in one circle, and you've got the new way of doing things in the other circle. You've got the old mission and the new mission. Well, there's got to be some places where they overlap. And so I think a lot of times we try to focus on tactics. Like we want to change we need to remodel the building, big change. We need to change our worship style, big change. So we go through these very big, visible, fight it out kind of things. And maybe that's not the first battle we want to fight. Maybe the first thing we want to do is go, okay, in the old way and the new way, what's in common? And so is there a mission that we would say, at least agree on? Hey, we want to reach our community. Is there a local school that needs help? That's not really a style but it's like, can the old and the new fight together on a project that doesn't have this high passion of I want to do it this way, I want to do it this way? Can we feed the poor? Can we clothe the needy? Right? Can we do something together and get a win? Because the win is working together, right? We just got to work together, and let that kind of springboard us into where we need to go.
That kind of dovetails into, I think, the one of the points that you make in your article about appealing to the emotion and not the logic. Logic says, hey, the building, needs to be updated and repaired and stuff, because we don't, we look like, we're in our heyday of 1988, and everybody else is, well beyond this, just in design aesthetics. It's like your grandmother's, sofa with the plastic still on it, and everyone else is like sitting on like those
cushy chairs.
Yeah, those beanbag things. But how do you how do you teach and encourage folks to appeal to the emotion without trying to manipulate them, without trying to be so hyperbolic and say, hey, listen, you can let people go to hell, or we can do this. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Which seems like a really overly dramatic way to, we do that all the time, because it's like we pull out the bazooka,
right,
all at once. And it's like, maybe we should have had a conversation at first, So I think the example that I use in the article is somebody that, comes and says, I miss the old songs. I miss the old songs. Well, we could easily pull out a Bible verse and say, times are changing, get with the program, all that kind of stuff. That's a fact-based. That is true. Times are changing, right?
Sure.
That is a fact. Emotion would be like, hey, these new songs that we're singing, they're really not for you, they're for your grandkids.
Right.
And so that kind of puts a face on it. It puts a story behind it. And so stories do way better than facts in this. One thing we say all the time at Church Fuel is facts will inform, but stories will inspire. And what do you want to do? You want to inspire someone, or do you want to inform somebody? I don't really need them to know the dates, times, and the bullet points and see the PowerPoint presentation. What I need them to do is be moved. And that's probably going to be a story. That's probably going to be emotion rather than fact. And in the end, it's going to work better.
And it's not even just, it's not, and we're not saying stop researching the facts and data, but maybe you shift that into start researching stories. What has happened because someone else has made that change already or taken that step? Is that good? What else? What other things can you pull, like stories, testimonials from other places that have done it? Is there anything?
Yeah, that's super smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned a really good example there. It's like, hey, there's somebody else who's been through this change and not only lived to tell about it, but is thriving because of it. And so a testimonial is really a story. It's really just a story. It's just saying somebody's been through this, somebody's gone through the same thing you're going through, and here's what happened because of it. Faith stories. Here's somebody who met Jesus, or somebody who had a spiritually transformative thing happen in their life. That's a story. Mm-hmm. And so to keep it focused on the story aspect of it rather than just the facts, the details. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's the technical specs, versus backing up and go, here's why.
We're going through this at our church. Thankfully, our pastor has taken nearly a year. He's brand new. Brand new to us. He's had like 3 or 4 other churches. And when he got in here, the first thing he did was he listened. He sat and listened.
Yeah.
He observed and he asked questions about, and we talked to different department leads, different ministry leads, and stuff about what do you see that's working, what do you see that's not, that sort of thing. And so you talk about how helping folks realize, while things are changing, while mentality is changing, while mindset is changing and all that, how to make sure that they understand the core things are not changing. In our case, some of that core is changing because the mindset is we're here to serve the Lord and we're here to be ministers to those people outside. But even so, there's still core values and things that are not changing, that our pastor reinforces, and that basically bringing all those to light in this manner, it ends up reinforcing that this stuff is not there.
Yeah.
Talk to us about how to remain, how to shift directions, but not. I guess is the question.
Yeah. So
the core, the values are the same. And being deepened, I guess, but the methodology is not.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good way to say it. I mean, so what's not changing? So as we communicate what is changing, I think it's equally as important to talk about what's not changing. And I think you mentioned something there that's really important. We talk about our church, and all people think of the church in context of their church, right?
Right.
So, but here's the deal: the church has been around for 2,000 years. It's gone through some pretty significant historical events. Throughout all of that, there's some pretty constant things that have stayed the same. The Great Commandment, the Great Commission, it's the same. I mean, it's absolutely been the same for a millennium. So, I mean, I think we're going to survive the decade. The church will survive millennials. The church will survive, whatever people say that this is changing, this is changing. We're going to survive all those things because it's eternal, and Jesus said he's going to build the church. So as we're leading our church through a big change, like, hey, we're moving. Our building is moving. Hey, we're changing our style of worship. Hey, the community's changed around us, and we've got to adapt our ministries to fit. Very big changes, right?
Sure.
But in the context of the mission staying the same, the purpose of the church is staying the same, the gospel is staying the same. Our tactics are going to have to change, right? We are even the most traditional of traditional churches that most of us will ever go into has air conditioning technology, right? So it's like the church has changed and it will keep changing, but the mission and the core will stay the same. So it's really helpful to remind people of that. Hey, we may change our name, We may change our logo. We may change our style. We may change our staff. Every pastor of every church eventually leaves. We all deal with change, right? So, but what doesn't change is the whole, like, people think they're losing their church. I've heard that. I'm losing my church. It's changing all around me. I'm losing my church. And so we've got to remind people that even though while life is about change, there are central core things that are never going to change.
Yeah, I'm ready. Sign. I'm ready. Let's redo the sanctuary right now. Put some backdrops up. I'm ready. Yeah. And would you say that it's not a one and done deal? This needs to be communicated multiple times. I would even say by multiple people.
Oh yeah.
Core group that says this isn't my church. Like, I think they need to hear it from multiple people. So don't get frustrated. I would say if you say that, you make that passion.
Oh yeah.
And someone says, well, there still isn't my church, whatever. Like it just, it depends on who it's coming from, the timing, did they eat lunch yet? I mean, it's going to be a process. And that kind of leads me into the final thing that you talk about in your article is create a communication timeline. You can't just say, all right, the budget's good. Let's redo the sanctuary. Let's put a hole in the stage for a subwoofer. Let's do it. How do we? You talk about the principle of the runway. How do we start that timeline, and not only that, communicate that timeline to the people that are stuck?
Yeah. So first of all, the timeline's probably really long, right? It's for most leaders, it's uncomfortably long and drawn out because we're there, right? By the time we make the announcement, we've got all this backstory that went into it, but everybody else is just hearing it for the first time. Yeah. So the timeline's really long. And that idea of the runway is like, you can land a little teeny tiny plane on a really small runway. So if it's a really small change that you're making in your church, I mean, you don't need to get, everybody, it's a little small thing. It's only going to affect a few people. But if you're making a big change, it's going to affect a lot of people. You need a really long runway. I mean, you're landing a 747. You need a really long runway, thousands of feet, right? 10,000 feet for some planes. Really long timeline. So it's not, I announced it on Tuesday. I preached on it on Thursday or Sunday. I sent an email on Tuesday, and now we're done. No, this is months and months and months. Let's develop it. Let's build it. And then I think, Justin, you said something that's really smart, is multifaceted, right? We got to preach on it. We need videos about it. We need testimonies about it. We need to have it in all different formats. We may need to print it on a piece of paper and mail it to somebody's house, right? All the formats, all the mediums, all the people, right? I need to say it, but we need other people to say it. We may have to build a coalition of people who are bought in and get them to say it. And so all of these things, we got to put together a really good plan. And this is where you need those how people. It can't just be, we're going to change. That's wow. You can't just be wow, 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 wow. You run over people with wow. Somehow people need to come along and say, all right, I'm going to make sure everybody knows. And we're going to do it on social media, but 75% of our church does not follow us on Instagram. So they're not going to see all those really cool things that we say. So we got to create a robust, very intentional, and a multifaceted communication timeline for big changes,
Do you think it's possible to, once you get change started, once you're moving down and you've accomplished some of this stuff, do you think it's possible to develop a culture that change is going to be constant, for lack of a better term? I mean, it may be like this for the next couple of years, but as things evolve, we may evolve our tactics. Right now, Facebook, everybody's, putting stuff on Facebook and communicating on Facebook and using groups and stuff like that. And now Facebook's under a whole bunch of fire, and they could change things. They could fall apart. They could do something. And now we have to shift everything to Instagram or whatever. So, I mean, can you get a culture or build a culture where change is constant and people can become or more readily fluid?
Yeah, I think so. Every time you go through a successful process, it builds credibility for the next process. And I'd be real hesitant to I don't know that I'd go and make a big spiritual case for why we should be on Facebook, because we got to know they're going to change, right? Sure. So it's like, if we're lifting up the tactic as the thing, right, and as the the end all be all focus of all our change, then when that thing changes, guess what? A bunch of people are going to say, see, I told you we shouldn't have done it.
Right.
So it's not, it makes no
behind why you concept. Go to Facebook.
That's right. Yeah. Because when Facebook changes their deal and you need to move on to something else, you didn't sell them on Facebook. You sold them on engagement. Hey, right, we need to speak to people where they are. It happens to be Facebook, but when it's something else, the principle's the same.
Right. Right.
Well, is there any words of encouragement you would have for someone that, we sat down in planning meetings, we know we're going to do this. We've budgeted it. We've made the sacrifices. We've cut from somewhere else. We've got all our vendors in place. We're ready to do whatever. But then pastor's starting to, you know what? So-and-so makes a good point. Miss Jane, she really reminded me where this church has been. And I don't know if the new vision is, what's some encouragement there? How can we, not only from you, but how can we build each other up and keep each other strong?
Yeah, great question. That's super normal. I think it's super normal to kind of introduce an initiative, and there's a wave of energy. But then as people start, here's what happens with Jane there, right? People start thinking through what it's going to cost them, right, and what it's going to mean for them. And then as they think about it, they're like, I'm not so sure about it. And so there's always pushback and there's always hesitation, right? Sometimes the pushback is like, no, I'm against this. Sometimes it's like, I don't know. And it's hesitation. And so I would say that is always going to come up, and to plan for it in advance, right? A naive plan is a plan that doesn't account for any pushback or hesitation. And so have a firm commitment. Like once you create a direction, once you create a decision, have a firm commitment. And the reason that you have a long runway is to deal with situations like that. Give yourself some grace, give yourself some time. I mean, if you need to take an extra week or two and answer some questions, it's worth it. It's worth it. And so a lot of different strategies will work, but the strategy that works the worst is a blending of all the strategies. And so take some time to clarify the strategy, clarify the direction, get the majority of the people going in the same direction. There's always going to be some people that don't like it. Always. When I was pastoring, there were things in the church that I didn't like, and it's like, I have the ability to change it, but it's not worth it. And so I'm just dealing with it. So be really patient with people, but also be really patient with the plan, I think.
Right.
Is it worth it, or is it manipulative to come up with some talking points to say, if we get this question or if we get this pushback, this is how we're going to address it? So I
think that's great leadership. I think it's great to think through, when we say this, what will people's questions be? And let's talk through. I'm working with a church right now, a great example of this, a church that's going through a pastoral transition. The pastor who started the church and has been there for 25 years is moving on positively to something else and is handing the reins to somebody who's been there also for a while, but is assuming the senior pastor role. And they're putting a team together. They're going to be rolling it out. They're going to be making some changes, and they are answering the questions that they think they're going to get now, so that when they get them, they're not going right. They're being great leaders in that process.
Or different answers from different people, which can frustrate even more.
Right.
That's right.
And I think that kind of brings up the point that the leadership all needs to back each other up.
Yes.
And that if someone says, well, it's not like this, I liked it when we did the hymns and all this sort of stuff, and why do we have TV screens and all this, and then the worship pastor going, yeah, I know, dude, I would much rather be having a harp and an organ. You can't have that, because then the whole system starts to fall apart, because there's dissension in the ranks. And I think that kind of dovetails with your commitment to your point that you don't waver, you're strong, you understand that there's going to be some opposition. But I mean, unless it's like 90% opposition, then
right. That's a different problem.
Yeah, exactly. It really is. It really is. That's a problem at the top.
Yeah.
So Michael, what can people do if they're ready to take the next step? They either want to connect with you, or if you have something just as like, here's a natural next step, where can people find you and where can people go? Where do you want people to go?
Great question. Thanks for asking. So tons of resources at churchfield.com. That's probably the best place to go. We have several different programs that people can connect with. There's a really great community of pastors that are there as well. A key common denominator, I think, for us is our pastors, or the people and the church leaders that we serve, that they want to grow in a healthy way, right? So they want to reach people, but they also want to have a healthy church in the process. And so churchfield.com has a ton of information, a ton of articles, even the article we were talking about today. And there's some great programs there to connect with.
Fantastic. Michael, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and letting us share you with our audience. We really appreciate it. And you've got some good wisdom here.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Appreciate what y'all do and how y'all are kind of providing. I think we share the same mission of just kind of providing some of that practical help for people. So it's much needed.
Great stuff. Great stuff from Michael. He's a wealth of information. He really puts a practical way of looking at this. Like I said, you take our conversation with Jeanette Yates, and then you take this, and it's like this wonderful little power pack of good information for bringing the older generation along, taking some of the people that are just stuck in the ways of the past and bringing them along, and moving the entire body and ministry forward, whether it's through ways of communication or technology. That's not the. Doesn't matter what the cool thing is or the next level thing is. It's just getting them to buy in and move forward with that to accomplish the goals that the church has. And if we're all on the same page with the same goals that we want to reach people, we want to share the gospel, we want to change people's lives, etc. Missional type goals and stuff, then everybody should be on the same page. It's just a matter of helping folks understand the new methods of doing that. So great information. You guys can check him out over at churchfuel.com. Now, if you're interested in learning how you can become a part of the Church Training Academy, then you can become a CTA, I can't say it, CTA Insider by going to churchtrainingacademy.com/join. When you join Church Training Academy, you're going to have access to our training library in our member section. You're going to have access to our private Facebook group, the CTA Insiders group, which actually I've seen some of you try to join, and I've had to say, sorry, this is for members only. That is for members. This is where all of our CTA insiders come together and work together, help each other out, whatever's going on. We share information, we share tactics, we share ideas. We help each other get through little breakthroughs. Someone's having a problem with a live stream. Why is it doing this? We all just kind of tackle it in there. We even go a step further by having a bi-weekly, I think that's what it is. I always get bi-weekly, semi-annually, semi-monthly, every 2 weeks. We get together for a live coaching session, a group coaching session where Justin and I and our insiders sit down and go through whatever's going on. Everybody can share their successes, things that they have, hey, we were having this problem, but I figured this out, so I wanted to let everybody know about this. And people are sitting there taking notes. Okay, when we come up to this problem, we'll know what to do. We work through issues. Justin sometimes does a website audit. I do a live stream audit. I do video audits in there. Just whatever the community needs. Someone's having a problem, got a roadblock, we all tackle it together. Not just me and Justin, but everybody else in there, because other people have insights that maybe Justin and I haven't thought of. So anyway, that's our bi-weekly mastermind group coaching session that we do in there. So that right there is worth the price of admission. I can tell you that. Everybody is upping their game, 2 weeks at a time, it seems, because there's stuff that people are trying, and then they come back and they tell us how it's working and stuff. It's fantastic time for all. So anyway, churchtrainingacademy.com/join. If you want to become an insider, we would love to have you. We'd love to come alongside you and help you take your message beyond the walls of your church, change lives, and just make a difference for the kingdom. Now take your pro tips, take the hacks, take everything that we are teaching you guys, and go out there and change lives.